She found it under the yellow light of her flashlight, half buried in dust and old prayer cards, and it looked so ordinary that for a second she thought her tired mind had made it up. A child's crayon drawing, two stick people holding hands beneath a lopsided house, pinned to the rusting bedrail with a safety pin. Around it, dozens more pictures, all the same size, all pinned like offerings. The pictures were not on a wall. They were pinned to the inside of the long, curved oxygen pipe that ran from the ceiling like a metal ribcage. And beneath that pipe, wrapped in what used to be a blue hospital blanket, was something that could not be spoken of in a calm voice. A clean set of footprints leading away from the blanket into the dark corridor, tiny shoe prints that were fresh in the dust. Nora's flashlight trembled. Her breath came out loud in the empty room. The hospital smelled like old paper and wet concrete and something sweeter that might have been perfume once. She bent and peered closer. The footprints were small, child small, but the pattern on the soles was modern, like rubber sneakers, not hospital-issue boots. The blanket was folded so neatly it looked like someone had laid down and then left. No body, no blood, no note, just the blanket and the footprints. Her radio, clipped to her scrubs, crackled with static. She wiped her palms on her pants, and the sound echoed. The stairwell behind her hummed with the hospital's tired machinery. She told herself calm lies. Maybe a homeless person. Maybe kids. Maybe a prank. But the air in that old ward hummed differently, like the memory of too many nights and too many bad things. Nora had been working night shifts for 8 years. She knew fear. She knew the small, sensible fear that came with being the only person awake inside a body of hospital bricks. This fear was different. It was not about charts or medications. It was not about the boredom of night rounds. It was a cold, thin thing that moved in the spaces between her ribs and the bone of the building. It whispered that the footprints were not alone. She took one step forward, and the heel of her shoe crunched against a paper cup. The sound moved through the corridor, and then something answered it by moving, slowly, very close behind the operating theater door. A scuff, then a hollow scrape, like metal on metal. Nora turned, and her light shuddered across a shape that had not been there a second before. A wheelchair, upright in the middle of the room, facing the ceiling, its rusted wheels locked like hands. No one sat in it. The wheels had tracks in the dust, new tracks, leading right up to the blanket. The tracks stopped in a neat, impossible circle and resumed past the doorway, heading toward the stairwell. Nora swallowed. Her stomach did a small, sick flip. Someone had been here. Someone small had walked out. Someone had left a child's world of drawings pinned up like a shrine. She couldn't explain any of it. She reached down and, with a steady hand she didn't feel, plucked one of the crayons from beneath the blanket. It was blue and still had wax on the tip. It stained her glove. Then the lights in the ward, sickly, old fluorescents, flickered. For a breath, it looked like the pinned pictures moved. A breeze? There was no breeze. The hospital was sealed, abandoned for years, its doors locked, its windows boarded. Nora's flashlight beam caught the safety pin that held the crayon drawing. The pin glinted like an eye. And then, behind her, something in the stairwell sighed. A long, wet sound like an old lung filling and emptying. She turned so fast the flashlight swung and sent a bright cursor through the dark hallway. At the mouth of the stairs, between two broken windows, stood a small handprint on the glass, smeared from inside to out, as if something small had pushed itself against the cold.
She ran.
Her footfalls were loud in the stairwell, and her breath burned. The stairwell smelled of rust and rain. At the bottom, where the hospital's main corridor opened into the old reception, she stopped dead. The main doors were open, not ajar, wide like someone had just left. The wind howled through the lobby, scattering old appointment cards and a brittle newsletter with the headline, "Waverly Hills closes its doors." A toy train, one of those little plastic ones with a smiling face, sat on the tiled floor, wheels clean and unclouded, as if it had just been taken from a toy box. The little train's painted smile looked obscene in the dark. Nora's radio bleated again. "Nora? You still there?" It was Marcus from security, his voice thin and sleepy. She fumbled for the microphone. Her hand shook. Doors open. Hall, child-proof seals broken. I think. She stopped, because behind the glass of the triage room window there was writing. The words were small and messy, written in a blue crayon directly on the fogged glass. W.E. left. Under it, someone had drawn a heart. The letters were not printed neatly. They tilted like someone who wrote with their arm held up high. Nora's ribs tightened. The toy train started to roll, ever so slowly, as if someone invisible had given it a gentle push. Then, without explanation and without the movement of air, the train stopped. The heart on the glass smiled. The safety pin in the raised pictures winked. The footsteps that led out through the corridor stopped at the threshold and then continued down the street, clean, small print fading into the night. Nora's mind tried to name the thing she was seeing. It could not. She put a hand to the glass, and the crayon smeared like a fresh wound. The word "we" flicked and blurred. Outside, under the street lamp, something small and pale ran across the sidewalk and vanished into the trees. Nora thought she heard a child's laugh. Then everything went very quiet. She whispered, "What the night shift nurse found in the abandoned Waverly Hills Hospital will never be explained." The sentence became a small prayer and a promise. It was true even before the words had left her mouth. She could not explain it, and she had no right to try. Yet the urge to explain burned like a fever. Then someone touched her shoulder. Nora spun around with the flashlight up like a sword. A figure stood in the doorway, an older man, his hair white and wild, wearing a security vest and a blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cloak. Marcus. He stared at the row of children's drawings and then at Nora's hands, stained with blue wax. His face went very pale. He whispered, "You didn't bring anything in, did you?" His mouth trembled. Nora shook her head. Marcus looked at the open doors as if expecting them to slam. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the stairwell. "We need to leave. Get your car. Call it in," he said. His voice was sharp now, like a blade. "Don't touch anything. Don't." But she had already touched something else. On her wrist, where the crayon had brushed her glove, there was a small, pale smudge. It was not the wax. It was skin pale and cold. It felt like a fingerprint that had been left there not by pressure, but by intent. She could feel it throb like a pulse. She tried to rub it off. It smeared and then reformed 3 tiny, perfect circles. "Don't," she heard herself say. Not because Marcus told her not to, but because the circles were a map she didn't want to read. They fit no shape she knew. Marcus's flashlight swung over the ward and froze at the old patient ledger on the nurse's station. They approached it like thieves. The ledger was open to a page with neat columns and names from decades ago. Someone had written, in a different hand across the margin, "We are here." The ink was not old. The letters shone wet in the light. Nora's throat closed. She could guess what people would say later. Vandalism, urban explorers, pranksters. But the footprints outside were fresh. The toy train had moved. The safety pins had been closed and opened, and the blanket had been folded with a care that hurt her chest. This building, which had been abandoned for years, had been used by something that knew how to be small and careful and human. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was not explainable. That was the point. They left. Nora followed Marcus down the cracked steps, past the parking lot where a row of cars sat like sleeping beasts. In the driver's seat of one of the cars, a pair of small shoes sat on the dashboard, facing the street. The shoes were wet. They did not belong to any of the car's owners. They looked as if they had walked out of the hospital and then disappeared. When Nora finally reached her car, she wanted to get away, to plant her feet on something solid and ordinary. But her nose prickled. She felt watched. She turned. Through a broken window in the hospital's facade, faint as a gray photograph, she thought she saw the outline of a child against the corridor wall, thin as a shadow, head tilted, hand up as if to press against the inside of the glass. The figure did not move in the way flesh moved. It moved like a stain that did not belong. She drove off with her hands tight on the steering wheel. Her radio crackled with rumors and the security guard telling her to stay on the line. The street lamps made pools of light that seemed too small. Her rearview mirror kept showing the hospital smaller and smaller until it was only a dark silhouette against the sky. Then, from the back seat, there came the soft click of a toy train. Her heart stopped. She slammed the car into park. Her hand back to the back seat, and her fingers closed on plastic. The train sat there, smiling with its painted face. It had not been in the back seat when she got in. Its wheels were clean. In the thin dark, Nora could just make out a smear of blue on the train's caboose, like someone had laid down a crayon drawing across its back. She screamed without sound and then, in the same breath, laughed because nothing made sense. She told herself she was losing it. She told herself she had to report everything, to call the police, to show them the footprints and the drawings and the train. But her radio had gone dead. The voice of security had gone blank, replaced by a thin hiss like breath. Her phone had no bars. The hospital address on her GPS had changed to a place that did not exist, a small, that read simply, "We." Nora sat there and stared at the smiling plastic face of the train. The blue crayon stain seemed to shift like water. She pressed the train into her palm. It was colder than she expected, like something that had been kept in a cold, dark place. The wheels left a tiny trail on the leather seat. The trail stayed. She remembered the footprints. She remembered the handprint on the stairwell glass. She remembered the moment she had whispered the sentence and felt it become true. Her pulse raced like a drum. She wanted to do the sensible thing. Go to the police, to security, to anyone. Instead, with a care that felt like sacrilege, she put the train in her bag and drove home. At her apartment, the night felt too thick. She left the bag on the kitchen table and sat under the harsh light, staring at the little train like it was a living thing waiting for permission to speak. She crawled onto the floor and pulled the train out. Its painted smile was a small sun. She reached out and touched the blue smear. It left a mark on her finger, 3 small circles, exactly like the ones on her wrist. Her phone buzzed suddenly. A message from an unknown number. Don't bring them home. The message was short, cold. She felt a laugh again, brittle and too loud, and then someone knocked on her door. Nora froze. The train rolled slightly in her hand, as if nudged by an invisible thumb. Her mouth went dry. She wasn't supposed to open the door. She shouldn't. Still, her feet moved. She crossed the apartment like a puppet, each step loud and brittle. The knock came again, softer this time, 3 slow taps, then 2, then 1. A child's rhythm. She looked at the clock. Midnight. Outside, the city hummed in a way that made her feel very small. Her fingers found the deadbolt and slid it back. The chain held. When she cracked the door, there was no one. Just beyond the threshold on her welcome mat, in the shallow pool of hall light, were 2 wet shoe prints. Small. Teeny. Perfect, like those left by the hospital. They led away down the hallway of her building, toward the stairwell. Nora's breath left her in a sound that could have been a scream. She slammed the door shut, heart pounding in her throat. The train in her bag clicked its wheels like a heartbeat. Her phone vibrated again. Another message. We left something behind. The light in her apartment flickered. The tiny circles on her wrist warmed like an ember. The toy train's smile gleamed in the dark. Nora pressed her back to the door and tried to steady herself. She thought of the ward's crayon drawings. She thought of the words on the glass. She thought of Marcus's pale face. She had promised out loud, to the empty room of the hospital and the cold of the night, that what she had found there would never be explained. The thought felt like a stone falling into a well. Somewhere in the building, on the floor above her, something moved. It was a soft, careful sound like the turning of a page or a child pulling a blanket up. Then, in the thin dark, a voice like someone breathing through a small hole sang a lullaby. It was wrong and right at the same time, the tune of a long-ago children's song that Nora remembered from a TV show when she was small. It was a song you didn't hear in hospitals. It was the only sound that shouldn't have been there. She reached for the bag. The train was warm. The blue crayon mark on its side had become a complete circle. The circles on her wrist burned. Her phone buzzed again, an image. She stared at it until her eyes watered. It was a photo of the ward, the very first picture she had seen, with one difference. In the photo, there was a small, pale hand pressed flat against the inside of the glass, fingers spread. The hand had a ring of 3 small circles marked on the palm. The message that came with the picture was a sentence she would remember the rest of her life, and that would be carved into the hollow of her heart like a secret kept too long. We left, but sometimes we come back. Outside, a child hummed the lullaby again, closer this time. The sound came up through the vents under her door, small and steady, as if someone very small sat beneath her. Her phone died mid-message. The lights in the apartment went dark. Nora felt for the flashlight in the bag. Her fingers closed on plastic, the cool, familiar click. She shined it toward the door. On the other side, through the peephole, the hallway was empty. But the welcome mat was gone. She opened the door. There, on the doormat where it had been, lay a single crayon drawing. 2 stick people holding hands beneath a lopsided house. A heart, and a short line written in messy blue crayon. Come home. Nora picked it up with both trembling hands. Her voice was a rustle. I didn't bring anything in, she told the empty hall. Her words were a promise and a lie. The train in her bag ticked like a small heartbeat. She turned the drawing over. On the back, in neat child script, someone had written 3 words that made the room tilt and the floor feel like it slid away. We found you. The air changed like the weather. The sound of feet, soft, tiny, patient, began to walk across her ceiling. Nora's light faltered, then died. She heard the toy train click once more, like a hand on a clock, and then, through the dark, the whisper of someone very close to her ear saying, "Where did you go?" She did not answer. She couldn't. The bag's zipper creaked, as if something small were testing the leather. Nora's world narrowed to the shape of the zipper and the cold metal of the train. She wrapped her fingers around it until her knuckles whitened. The whispers multiplied into small breaths, counting, like children counting in the dark. She tried to remember every sensible thing she'd been taught about fear. Breathe, ground, move. But the breaths were not of the living. They were patient. They were old. The phone had one last message waiting, unseen. It flashed silently on the table, a location pin, blinking, then a text that read, "Come back where it started." The train, warm and plastic in her palm, clicked open its tiny mouth like a secret. The blue crayon circles around its caboose glowed faintly. Nora tossed the toy into the air. It landed on the floor and rolled toward the bedroom like a small, obedient animal. The door to the bedroom stood slightly ajar, and behind it, a slit of shadow that looked like the inside of a tunnel. The lullaby rose, closer, as if the singer were just outside the slit. Nora turned her flashlight toward the bedroom. The beam struck the wall and drew, with sharp light, the shape of a small handprint. 4 fingers. A palm. 3 tiny circles stamped in the center. Something small tapped the bedroom door. She swallowed. The sound of the tap echoed like a bell. Then, very quietly, something whispered through the wood. We found her. Nora's flashlight flickered once, and then the battery died. She was left with the darkness and the sound of tiny shoes running across her ceiling and the knowledge that the thing she had found in the abandoned Waverly Hills Hospital had not been an event that would stay there. It had followed her. It had found her. And outside, beyond her window, under the sick yellow light of the street lamp, small footprints were making a new path toward her front door.